All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Maryland Terrapins. Looking at this coaching staff, Mike Locksley, 33-41 record since 2019 when he became the head coach. Pep Hamilton, first year in the role as offensive coordinator. First job since 2022, so he comes off the streets to take this one. Ted Mazzino and Azar Abdul-Rahim are going to be the defensive coordinators. Pretty solid offseason, 25th ranked high school class, 36 currently in the portal. 4-8 mark after 3 straight winning seasons was the result last fall. Getting things started with the offense. They're only going to return 2 starters on a unit that was 100th in pretty much almost every single category here, less than 24 points per game. They threw the ball well, but they were down in a lot of games. Couldn't really run the football at all. Getting things started, I think the most intriguing part of this football team is going to be the quarterback battle. You have Justin Martin, whose only action was against Penn State last year. Played well, 73% comp rate on the road. He's 6'4", 220, has a powerful arm, good athletic ability. He'll need to improve his mechanics, though, and his decision-making will need to be proven. But Martin seems to be a quality starter here, despite the limited experience. And the reason why it's so intriguing is because they picked up a pretty highly ranked recruit in Malik Washington, the 5th-ranked quarterback prospect. True freshman, 6'4", 215, an impressive runner that makes things happen outside the pocket, showcases a nice tight release and some good velocity, has showcased some nice poise versus pressure, high upside dual threat talent here. This is probably something that intrigues me when it comes to Maryland, Nick, because I don't think this will be an overly great year for the Terrapins, but I'm interested in this QB battle and if Washington can turn into something.
I think Washington can certainly win this battle. He has all the potential in the world, a high upside prospect out of high school that can certainly come out here and win this battle and really be the next starter for this Maryland team. I think it's certainly possible he can find a way to win this battle. Coming in from, Glen Burnie, Maryland, in the in-state Archbishop Spalding High School, keep him in state, 6'4", 215. I think he's a really solid prospect that's got good footwork, good arm, solid in the pocket overall. Justin Martin is not a bad option right now if you want to get somebody that's got at least some experience playing in a game. Like you said, in that Penn State game, he was not bad on the road, 73% comp rate, 1 touchdown, 167 yards passing for him. Really decent numbers there. I think it's not bad at all. Didn't play a whole lot, obviously, outside of that. So the film on him is limited here. This is a Maryland team. I think this offense does not have a lot of upside. I'm going to be blunt and go out and say that right now. I think this is an offense that's very weak, not returning a whole lot of starters. I don't think this offense has a whole lot of upside. So maybe you do roll the dice and start the true freshman quarterback and see if he can be a difference maker early on. I don't know if that's the worst gamble in the world. We'll have to see what they decide here, but that's certainly an interesting QB battle they have in Maryland.
In the wide receiver realm, pretty respectable unit. Jaleel Farouk comes over from Oklahoma. This guy showcased great abilities to track the ball downfield, especially on underthrown balls. Impressive quickness leads to him getting the ball quickly. Capable of playing slot or out wide. Sees most of his time at the Z, though. Good at missing forced tackles. He was injured last year for the Sooners. Caleb Webb, 6'3", 204, some solid size. Didn't play much for Tennessee. Should carve out a bigger role here. Octavian Smith, a pure slot option. Had some notable performances late in the year for the Terrapins. Liked his consistency across that 4-game stretch. Dorian Fleming, coming off a strong season at Georgia State at tight end, 6'3", 234, will be leaned on a good bit. As the rest of the pass-catching group is mostly inexperienced players, guys like Ryan Manning and Mekhi White. I think this isn't terrible, Nick, for what it could be. I think Jaleel Farouk's a pretty underrated addition. I thought that guy probably could have went to a more notable school. I think Caleb Webb might be ready to impress. And again, Smith had some nice consistency. So this is not a bad starting trio here.
Not a bad starting shooter. I think Farouk certainly made the move to Maryland because he is from the state of Maryland. He's from Upper Marlboro, Maryland, not that far from College Park. Pretty sure those two are very close to each other, actually. So maybe that's why he went, made this move, try to go play closer to home. I don't blame him at all. He was really solid in 2023, right? 700 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns in that season. Was not healthy last year, which was a big part of Oklahoma's struggles. A bit disappointing because he was supposed to be a key player for them last year. Caleb Webb didn't really do anything at Tennessee, hoping to see if he can potentially step up. Octavian Smith was not bad in his reps last year for this Maryland team, 315 and 2 scores for him, while Knotts was an okay receiver as well, 160 for him and 1 score. This is a unit that's not bad here. I think there's some high upside potential here. Ryan Manning's not a bad player for the depth chart either for this unit. Curious to see what this wide receiver room can do. I have questions about the quarterback play. Obviously, we talked about that just a minute ago. But if the quarterback play is above average, I think these guys can certainly, make things easier for their quarterbacks. A lot of good hands here and some solid assets.
Looking at the offensive line, left tackle was a position of weakness for the Terrapins last season. They added Bertrell Perry at 6'5", 305 from Central Connecticut. He was only, average in his first year as a starter for them. Alan Heron at 6'5", 325 was a below average player at right tackle last season. They could move him over to the left side. Ryan Howerton will start at left guard, 6'5", 334. Isaiah Wright didn't play last year, but in his first 2 years at Buffalo, played over 1,300 snaps at left tackle and another 400 at center, so he has some nice coveted versatility there. Aloy Ba returns to his post at right guard, 6'5", 331. He was a solid pass blocker, struggled to generate push on the ground. I think this will be, probably a below-average offensive line once again, Nick. I know they went out and got a couple of different guys here, and they just need to figure out a good starting lineup to really start to get some consistency. And I think they'll find that this year if they can stay healthy. For the most part, though, I don't have high expectations for them up front.
I don't have a lot of high expectations either. This is definitely a weaker unit in the conference. I think Ba is not a bad right guard. I think Isaiah Wright's not a bad prospect at center either, who could be solid for this team. A younger unit here, plug in a couple different guys here. Perry was an interesting portal ad, could potentially be solid at left tackle, but not a great unit here, one of the weaker ones in the conference.
Looking at the verdict for this offense, they weren't abysmal last year, but the high-end talents that kept them afloat are now gone, and they start from scratch. I'm intrigued by the QB battle and who will emerge in the run game of the O-line and wide receiver group, or otherwise lackluster completely. And what did I go with here? A C+. I think that's right around where they're going to be at. But if Washington can start and he can really impress Nick, they could certainly find themselves having some better production.
Yeah, I think this is a C unit that is, sorry, not an A unit. This is a C unit for me right now. I think Ray's not a bad back. I think he'd be okay for this team. But overall, I think the upside for this offense really just isn't there here. I think this is a very weak unit that's going through a transition overall. A weak offensive line, quarterback's a ton of question mark there. Good wide receiver room with some solid depth. But outside of that, I think the running back room's kind of weak as well. I think Nolan Ray's not a bad back, like I said. But overall, this is a C offense for me. I think they were okay at times last year, but I think they're going to regress this year and just not be a very good unit.
Now move to the defensive side of the ball, where they gave up over 30 points per game. They return only 5 starters from a group that only put up 14 sacks a season ago. The defensive end group has Neo Avery, 6'4", 273. Only saw a few snaps last fall. Daniel Owens at 268 pounds was slightly better at the same amount of reps. D.D. Holmes, 6'6", 255, comes over from Florida State after only playing in one game for them. They did a lot of work in the portal on the interior D-line. Ian Thomas from St. Francis, 6'4", 334, is a really good run defender for them. Nice tackler in the hole in Cam Rice from Ohio at 6'3", 290. Joel Starlings didn't do too much in 2 seasons at UNC, but he is 6'4", 320. Cedric Smith was a solid rotational piece on the other hand for Alabama A&M. Dylan Fontes, 6'5", 290, returns but struggled in his appearances last fall. They also have an incoming 4-star in Bryce Jenkins, who should be in the fold as well. I think this is a solid room here. Nothing really stands out at the moment. They were doing a pretty good job of adding some size to the interior, Nick, so that's certainly quality and nice to see. But again, only 14 sacks last season. Nobody right here is standing out when it comes to the tape or what they've accomplished elsewhere that shows they're just going to be great against the pass.
A weak start to this defense. I think Ian Thomas was not bad for St. Francis last year. Making the jump from the FCS level, obviously, to the FBS level is certainly tough here. I think Dylan Fontes is a guy that maybe could step up at defensive tackle. He was weak in his reps last year. They think Bryce Jennings could be a really big star for them. As a true freshman, want to see how many reps he gets. I think he'd be really solid for this guy. He's a good player overall. You're plugging in there at nose tackle potentially. Daniel Owens could be okay as well. He was solid in some of his reps, a bit of a more experienced player. But a weak defensive line here, there's no sugarcoating that.
Look at the middle of this defense for Maryland. They returned 2 veterans at linebacker. Daniel Wingate was 3rd on the team in tackles. Michael Harris was a solid run defender and a bit lesser of a role in 2024. Trey Reddick saw nearly 200 snaps, but didn't really do much until late in the year of his freshman campaign. DJ Samuel also had some big games late in the season. He was more impactful despite seeing less reps. Also had a receiving touchdown last year, so he's got some versatility they like. Some solid depth as well as the backups got on the field last year, at least marginally. They also have brothers Keon and Keyshawn Flowers, who are expected to be solid contributors as well. Not a bad area for Maryland. It sucked to lose a guy like Ruben Hoplite. He was a big leader for them. Caleb Wheatland as well. So that's less fortunate for Maryland. I think this is a respectable group nonetheless.
I think this is a respectable linebacking group. Probably the best part of this defense. I think Wingate was really solid for this team last year. 50 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss for him. He's really solid. Michael Harris, 34 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Not bad numbers there. Trey Reddick was okay in some of his reps. 16 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack. DJ Samuels, 14 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss. He's really good at getting in the backfield. A solid asset for this team. Had a pass breakup as well. I like those 4 linebackers there. I think that's a solid unit overall.
Now we move to the secondary for Maryland. They added 2 transfers to come anchor down the cornerback spots. Jamari Glasker played 500 snaps for Wake Forest. Wasn't that good in coverage. Was also targeted a lot, though. Dante Joyner is undersized at 6', 174, but he was a stout run defender. Made plays in coverage. I think he's a nice player here. Brandon Lee, Kevin Humes both got on the field, but didn't see that much time. Lakeith Rowland didn't play until the final 4 games of the year. Spent all his time at outside corner to cap off his true freshman season. He's likely to occupy the slot this fall as a starter, He and Judith Jenkins who struggled in his freshman season, are going to battle for that spot, though. Safety group returns the best player in the secondary, and Jalen Husky. He's been a good player in the box, and he had 2 straight seasons of 3+ interceptions. I think Husky's certainly going to be a bright spot there. Le'Veon Scruggs was a really good run defender, but was average in coverage. Messiah Delhomme, a 4-star athlete in this year's class, expected to make an immediate impact in the back end. I think the secondary has some good upside due to its youth and some reasonable experience. I think they're certainly going to perform maybe better than they did last year against the Pass, where they were 106 nationally. I think Husky, Nick, with some of these other veterans, is certainly going to pay some dividends.
I think Husky's a really solid player that could be really good for this secondary. Definitely probably the best lone standout defender on this team overall. 45 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 picks, and a pass breakup for him. I like what he can do. I think Scruggs is not bad either. 43 total tackles, a tackle for loss, a pick, and 2 pass breakups for him. Overall, outside of that in the secondary, they added Glasker, who's I think a decent add out of the portal. Joyner might not be a bad add either, but 2 new cornerbacks always concerns me. Fresh faces there, I think, is certainly something you want to be a little bit concerned about. Roland at nickelback was not a bad asset either, though, but still, this is just a weak defense. Again, there's no sugarcoating it. A weak offense, weak defense here. I'm not very high on this Maryland team, and I think the linebacking depth is definitely really solid, but outside of that, I worry about the secondary a little bit, and I worry about the pass rush certainly.
Now we move to the schedule and the prediction for Maryland. Terps, I guess the verdict first on the defense. They struggled last season, now lose a lot of their best players in depth, meaning plenty of youthful figures will be forced into the lineup. I do like some of the guys in the middle, a few in the secondary, but as a collective unit, not all of them confident in them showcasing improvements, especially up front. What did I go with? A C here. I don't think they're going to be all that special, but maybe they can impress us, Nick, because in the past, Maryland has had some pretty respectable defenses under Loxley.
This is a unit that's been okay in previous years. I just don't think it's a very good unit this year. I think it's weak in the defensive line unit. I think the secondary is weak as well. I like the linebacking core. I think it's a solid unit overall, and I think Wingate's really good. I do like what they have in Husky. Probably the best defensive player on this team. Probably one of the best players on this team. I think Husky's a fun player to watch. Certainly keep an eye on him. Maybe he'll improve his stock as a player overall throughout the season. But I'm not very high on this defense. I think a C is a very fair grade.
Now we finally move to that schedule in the prediction. Maryland isn't a team that has much to be excited about. They're far below average in the trenches and lose their top skill guys from last season. I think the QB battle will be a high-rated recruit, something to monitor, and could be a position that allows them to challenge most opponents. But the defense won't be able to provide the playmaking to make them contenders. Loxley, I don't think he's on the hot seat, but I think he'll certainly warm up a bit if this prediction is indeed accurate. 3-9 here. Don't really know who they're going to beat. Is the home field advantage going to give them anything? Not against those opponents, I wouldn't think.
This is a tough schedule for Maryland. I think this year the only winning you're really going to see in College Park is going to be from the students who are not going to lose a tailgate. Those fans, they'll go pretty hard. Those students, they'll party hard. They'll have some good tailgates. But outside of that, I don't expect a whole lot out of this Maryland team this year. I like Mike Loxley a lot. I thought he was really good at Alabama. I think he was a really good offensive coordinator here. And if he does get fired after the season, which I don't think he will, even if they go 3-9, I don't think he's going to get fired. He would be a really good asset to bring back, to certain offenses as their coordinator. If they go 4-8 and 3-9 back-to-back seasons, though, I think his seat will certainly get very warm. They had won 3 bowl games in a row from 21 to 2023, but then they went 4-8 last year. Looks like they're going to go 3-9 this year. This is a tough schedule. There's really no gimmies at home in conference play. Maybe you get Michigan State at the end of the season to catch them lacking, but outside of that, I don't really see a whole lot of wiggle room here. That game against FIU on opening weekend FAU, that is, not FIU. FAU, Florida Atlantic, is interesting one. Maybe you want to keep an eye on that one if you're interested in betting the spread or something, if you want to go after that. But I just don't think this is going to be a very good season for Maryland. Not a whole lot really to write home about. Maybe Washington can win that QB battle, and that should be some fun. But this is going to be a bad team that's going to struggle all year long.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.